Hey everyone, it's Daniel, and today is the third day of my 30-day video challenge. And so this is my third video, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about meditation, something else that is near and dear to my heart. The last couple of videos have been about psychedelics and my psychedelic experiences. Another important part of the path for me has been meditation. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And maybe I'll try and give you a timeline. So we'll go chronologically. And then we'll get a little bit more into like the insights and the benefits of meditation as well. Kind of what I've gotten the most out of, the maximum mindfulness mileage, if you will, for this stuff. So maybe I can just tell you a little bit about how it got started, and how I got into meditation, because it's a bit of a weird story actually. I was in high school and college. I was primarily identified myself as kind of a smart, geeky kid who was interested in math and physics, and I studied that quite a bit. I'm a huge nerd. I carried around this giant physics textbook with me for the last few years of high school and into college. Tipler Physics for Scientists and Engineers, and it was a 1,000-page manual covering everything from old school Newtonian physics all the way up to modern day relativity and quantum theory. So this was pretty much my framing of reality. It was basically materialist. I was not a spiritual person at all. In fact, I was a rather staunch atheist, and I was rather antagonistic against churches and religions. Starting in high school, when I started to kind of think through belief systems for myself. So my first phase of this journey was very materialistic and rejective of anything archetypal, numinous. And then I got to college, and let's see, what is the order of events? It must have been about 2 days after my first experience with LSD. So, I mean, that's how fast these things happen. Perhaps that was more than a coincidence, but a couple days after my first experience with LSD, which was terrifying, mind-blowing, ecstatic, amazing, otherworldly. A couple days after that, I just probably listening to a random radio station and found a clip of Alan Watts talking about what if money was no object. And I just heard him talking, and somehow immediately I knew that he had had the experience that I had had. And I just started laughing. I just heard his voice, and I heard him talking about his spiel, and I just started laughing and crying at the same time. I was like, this guy gets it. So I looked into Alan Watts, started listening to more of his stuff, paying more attention to what he was saying, kind of following up on his reading list, things like that. That's also how I kind of discovered or got into Carl Jung, was through Alan Watts discussing Jung's concept of the shadow, which is frightening in itself. But Watts had very good things to say about Zen Buddhism, so that was kind of it seemed like a partial answer. I knew I had to do something about my reactive, wild mind, and I didn't know exactly what to do. And I was listening to Alan Watts talk about meditation and Zen Buddhism, and I thought, maybe this would be a good place to start. Maybe I need to start meditating. And that's pretty much when it started. I mean, I kind of, so what happened was I fumbled around a lot on my own, trying to figure this thing out. And that period lasted for years. And I was rather identified with kind of like a geeky, smart, intellectual person. And I thought, I taught myself all this physics stuff. I taught myself calculus. I taught myself how to play piano in high school. So I can figure out this meditation thing. I can teach myself. So I kind of embarked on that path and used online resources and guided meditations, and doing some digging around at the library and research institutions looking for papers, and eventually that kind of led me to the trail of understanding the neuroscience behind what's happening with meditation and how the different brain regions interact differently or connected up differently in people who practice meditation regularly. And I think it was really at that point when I started to dig into the real science behind it that progress began to be made. Because before that I was kind of using my intuition and just sheer like brute force method. Like if I just do this long enough, I will figure it out, I will understand. And that it turned out to be a bit of a fallacy. So I was not one of these people who could kind of just sit down on the cushion and have a enlightenment or an awakening experience of some kind. In fact, my early experiments with meditation were just uncomfortable, to say the least, but spectacular failure, I guess, would be a way of putting it. At first I would meditate. I would set a timer for 15 or 20 or 30 minutes, and I would sit down on a pillow or a cushion and sit there to meditate. And then the alarm would go off 20 or 30 minutes later, and by that point I had completely forgotten that I was trying to meditate, and I had gotten up and wandered off and checked something on my computer or sent a message or left the room, went to the bathroom, whatever it is. So my mind was very, very distractible, very stampeding wild, like an elephant that's out of control. And so that was kind of the first phase of the practice, and I limped along like that for a while, and I kept doing the thing that Alan Watts suggested, which was just, observe your thoughts. That's all you have to do, is just keep observing. And this is awesome advice, actually, because I learned a lot about myself and I learned a lot about human psychology, but it didn't actually help me train my reactive mind. So that's when I started to understand that there was different levels to this practice, or it became clear to me that these different styles of meditation, concentration versus observing your thoughts versus like a body scan or a relaxation technique, that these all kind of had different goals, different outcomes, so that they worked at different levels of mind or worked on different aspects of the mind. And so when I started to really understand that, I think that's when I decided that I actually needed a real teacher. Someone who I realized it was so much more complicated than I originally thought, that having someone who had maybe done this before might not be a bad idea to talk to them. So eventually I did that, and I think that was around 2017, somewhere around there. I started getting more interested in kind of finding a mentor or a one-on-one teaching situation, instead of using online resources or just going from an ancient text. I was really interested in the Lankavatara Sutra for some reason. That's strange. The Lankavatara Sutra is like a 14th or 13th century text from Central Asia, and it's very cryptic, very full of symbols and imagery that I didn't understand, full of words that I didn't understand. The Indians and the Chinese have like 100 different words for the word that we call consciousness. They subdivide it and have subtle differentiations that we just can't possibly understand. And maybe I should back up a little bit and talk about like what was my life like before all of this started happening, like before I kind of started getting into spirituality, and particularly before that first experience with LSD that turned me on to all of this. And because I think that's an important part of the story. Basically where my mind was at, I was probably, I would qualify for depression, or some kind of anxious, like anxiety, generalized anxiety, social anxiety, something like that. And I was also quite angry, existentially confused, and really disillusioned by the world. Right before I had taken LSD, I think I was a freshman in college, and I was sitting in my dorm room. I was an engineering student, taking lots of math and physics courses, and on top of all that, on my own time, I was studying the Feynman lectures, which are just legendary physics content if you're interested in modern physics. Really great lecture series. Feynman's one of the greatest physics teachers, of the 20th century. And I was sitting in my dorm listening to some audio transcripts of an interview with Richard Feynman, and he was talking about working on the Manhattan Project, where they built the atom bomb for the United States military. And man, he said that the physicists and the engineers at this top secret location, at the Manhattan Project, which was not disclosed to the public until afterwards, until it was, the bomb was already built and dropped. He said that the engineers and scientists working at the compound at some point realized that Germany was, they were running out of money, they were running out of resources, and they would inevitably lose World War II. It became apparent some months before they ultimately dropped two bombs on Japan, and yet he says we didn't stop building the bomb. And this was just that line, we couldn't stop building the bomb. Just that to me, that was like a bomb going off inside of my head. That was just basically the moment that I realized that no amount of material knowledge or technological power could save us, was enough to fix the problems that are going on this planet today. And I just sat at my desk and cried, because it was like this whole global thing that was going on, plus everything that I believed in turned out to be a kind of a convenient story, only part of the picture, a curated set of facts that maybe wasn't quite good enough. We had knowledge, but there wasn't enough wisdom. And of course, I wasn't able to articulate that at the time, but I was sitting there at my desk crying, and I think that's when I realized that I couldn't be an engineer, first of all, and that, like once the floor drops out of your belief system, you start scrambling for a new one. So I knew I also had to figure something out. And unfortunately, because I was still kind of in the grip of this materialist paradigm, obviously, basically I got so depressed and anxious that for a while I did turn to drugs and alcohol to kind of take the emotional edge off of that struggle that had just become fully conscious in my mind. Unfortunately, you can't fix these kinds of problems with substances of the ordinary variety. So the ones that people typically take to deal with anxiety and depression are like alcohol and stimulants, sometimes marijuana, and I experimented with all of that, and thankfully before I killed myself, before I drowned myself with alcohol or, made myself seriously sick or injured, I found LSD. And that's really, of course, you already know this is what changed everything. But man, yeah, leading up to that, I would get so angry. I would lay in my bed and just cover my face with a pillow and just cry and scream into it. I was so angry. I was so confused. And I didn't know that this experience, I didn't realize that this existential dropping out of the materialist belief system was kind of a collective phenomenon, and it was going on in other people too. Again, because I was kind of jarred into this material paradigm, which treats people as separate, and it's kind of rugged individualism is part of the materialist Americana ideology. So I was still very much trapped in that. LSD was kind of the crack in the door. It cracked the door open to psychological experiences and ways of seeing the world that I almost certainly would have otherwise passed by, even though I was existentially distressed. I didn't have the kind of perceptual filters, insight. I don't know. I wouldn't have turned to meditation if it hadn't been for psychedelics. So that's confusing and interesting. They kind of opened my mind to this realm of bliss and peace that I had never experienced before. And then immediately afterwards, I realized that what I wanted was to figure out how to get back to that state where absolutely everything is perfect and nothing needs to be changed. Everything is the image of God. Everything is the numinous experience. I wanted to figure out how to get back to that without resort to pharmacological means, without taking drugs, without getting high. And so that's fundamentally, that is why I pursue and pursued meditation. And now maybe I can give you a little update. I started meditating around the year 2012. Like I said, right a couple days within discovering Alan Watts and diving more into those teachings. So I started meditating, and so now I'll tell you kind of where I'm at now. So where I'm at now is I have a really cool kind of a modern hip teacher that I check in with him. He's kind of more like a tutor or a mentor, but I check in with him like once a month maybe, or every couple months, for an hour maybe, and we discuss specific practice techniques, and in particular like places that I might feel that I'm getting stuck in the practice, and that is tremendously useful. He's kind of he's the 1,000 foot view guy, and check in with him a few times per year, and kind of he's guided hundreds of students, so we kind of know, he knows the places where people get stuck or are conceptualizing it wrong. Just like a really good math teacher would. It's not that you can't figure it out all by yourself, but having a math teacher around can save you thousands of hours, because they've done it before. They've seen this exact solution, and they have some insight into 1,000 people have walked into this classroom, and all 1,000 of them made this same mistake, and so there's a virtual certainty that you're going to make it too. This is the real value of a meditation teacher. It's not that they're teaching you something that you couldn't otherwise do. It's just pointing out that which would not have been obvious unless it was already pointed out, right? Once it is pointed out, it is perfectly obvious, and it's easy to prove, because they're just helping you understand how your mind works, and we're all humans, right? So there's something inside of all of our minds that more or less functions in the same way. So this is the value of a teacher. I've been checking in with the teacher for maybe about 3 years, and I've done some retreats. I've done most of my practice is what you would call just a daily life practice. In other words, I take about an hour. Sorry. I take about an hour or an hour and a half per day to sit very quietly and work on specific meditation techniques. And I built that up over time, starting at about 20 minutes. So it took me a couple of years to get up to the higher time intervals, but 20 minutes is a great starting point. 20 minutes is just enough to really hone in on a technique and practice it. And then see how your mind, your state of mind changes over time, because that's part of what you're doing in meditation is learning how to adapt to changing mental conditions, right? Just like if you're, if you're riding a mountain bike up and down a trail, there are certain points along the trail where you want to apply more effort as you're going uphill, and then you're going downhill, you can coast a little bit. And if you want to maintain a constant velocity, or if you want to stay balanced on your bike, at every moment you're kind of exerting different forces and applying effort in different directions. So some extended practice with these things is extraordinarily useful. Hence the kind of universal recommendation of a formal seated meditation practice. And the other thing that I do every single day, and I try and do it 24/7, every moment I can possibly remember, is to do essentially what would be called a background practice, which is including I'm doing it right now. So in addition to thinking about talking to you guys and recording this video and walking on this trail, I am maintaining 5 to 10% of my energy doing a background practice where I'm kind of constantly monitoring the amount of stress in my body, tuning into the pace of my breathing or the feeling of muscular tension inside the chest and abdomen. I'm always paying attention to that, and making kind of micro adjustments as necessary. And with those two things, if you're doing a formal sitting practice of 20 to 30 minutes a day, and this kind of as much as you can a background practice in your life, especially with emphasis on those moments where you need it the most, sitting in traffic, getting anxious at the doctor's office, things like this, you can integrate this path of meditation into your life without doing it the old school way of running away to a monastery and doing these crazy retreats where you sit in silence for months or sometimes even years. So I think if you work smarter, not harder, you can apply and get amazing results with this stuff in daily life. So maybe I can give you a little emotional baseline for where I'm at these days, compared to just before my LSD experience. I was essentially depressed 24/7. I was anxious. I was using substances to take the edge off. I was, kind of chasing women as a kind of temporary hedonic pleasure. I was not in a good place with my family. They weren't happy about all these other aforementioned behaviors. So then there was social tension in my family. So where I'm at now is, let's just see, my anxiety levels are significantly lower. I wake up almost every morning, and instead of kind of constantly fretting about what's going on that day, what am I forgetting, it's kind of ruminating, self-referential thought. That, for the most part, has dropped away. It'll come back every now and then, but with some of this background practice, just applying 10 or 15% of my energy to working on that, I can usually suppress that kind of anxious feeling, pretty much 24/7, if necessary, if it's even there. And I don't need to use substances anymore to take the emotional edge off of things, because I've learned this other coping technique. And one of the real amazing outcomes of this mindfulness practice is a kind of an ever deepening emotional peace, because the more that you practice mindfulness and you develop the skill of calming and relaxing your mind and body, you also simultaneously become more confident. You become more confident in your own psychic stability, and that enables you to go out into the world and act more effectively, which, the more effective and the more successful person you become in the real world, your serotonin levels adjust, and you feel like you're a more competent person. You get in this feedback loop. And once you get into this feedback loop, it's like an upward spiral, and it's really fun. And then the mindfulness techniques become not so much taking the edge off of the worst parts about experiencing negative emotion. It becomes more about getting in touch with those emotions, turning towards them, opening up to them. And that's when the real growth comes, when you stop trying to push away your emotions, because you now have the coping skills. You're so strong that you don't have to push them away anymore. You can actually just sit with them. You can just be with them no matter how you feel. This is when you're really making progress on the path. And this is, again, this even is a landmark on a much longer path. But this is the part of the path that I'm at. I'm no longer continually fighting that losing battle against negative emotions, and I'm actually getting into more of that positive feedback loop associated with the turning towards and getting insight from negative emotions. So these negative emotions, they start to become your guides, they become your friends, they become your information database that you can tap into. They are your emotions are your intuition, so that you can start to use these emotional information coming into your psyche. Once you're not afraid of it, it's like it's like a cat's whiskers. They're like hypersensitive little hairs that stick out and can detect all kinds of interesting phenomena in the environment. This is what your emotions become. This is what your intuition becomes when it gets fully integrated like that. So my depression, my anxiety is far lower, probably 80% lower, or 20% of the original magnitude of the way I used to feel. My energy has improved. My relationships have improved. It's kind of almost a synchronicity, but I've started to connect a lot with my mom the past few months, including we went to some what would you say, like group therapy, family therapy, and worked on some communication issues, and had some really, really nice open dialogues, which I wouldn't say I wouldn't expect it, but I was pleasantly surprised. I mean, I was able to connect with my mom on the level that a lot of this stuff that I've been dealing with for the past decade, turns out it wasn't so personal. Like, she kind of confessed to me that she has some ruminating thoughts and some of the exact same symptomology that I was experiencing kind of around the time I took the LSD and had this crisis with Richard Feynman. So you get to a part of the path, I think you get to a part where it's like you look around and you see that everyone is also on a path that is somewhat parallel to your own, and that can be an added form of energy, because now we're in this together. We're waking up together instead of it's just me. Hey. So I think I'm going to end the video here, and that's been a bit rambly. But in terms of, if you're curious about meditation and how it's going to affect emotions, attention, the ability to pay attention, this is essentially the domain which meditation has helped me the most. Oh yeah, maybe I should have said that. Also, my ability to concentrate. Remember at the beginning, I would sit down and then the bell would go off 20 minutes later, and I couldn't even, I forgot that I had been meditating. Now it's getting to, I can comfortably sit for about 45 minutes in kind of that very open, very calm, kind of timeless place where it's like the 45 minutes pass and I hardly even notice, or I think it has only been like 10 or 15 minutes or something, kind of that flow state where you're so deeply engaged with whatever it is that you're doing that you don't notice the time passing. So I can meditate for 45, 50, maybe an hour, pretty comfortably. And then after that, my body starts to ache, my attention does start to get tired. And so I'll usually end the meditation there, or push it a few minutes past my comfort zone, but my comfort zone has greatly increased. I'm not even too concerned about like pushing it further, because the benefits of meditating for an hour every day or 45 minutes are so tremendous that I have the energy and the emotional capacity to do the other things in life that I want to do on a daily basis. And so for me, I feel like this is a pretty good place to just keep working on myself in the world. I've stabilized my attention and my moods enough that I can I can feel good about leaving the cushion every single time and going out into the world and being my best self, being effective. So if you're wondering what are the benefits of meditation, or where can this take me, or it's going to take me from A to B, where's B, where do we start, where do we go, hopefully this has been some help, and hopefully you'll give it a shot. I have a meditation class every Monday at 7:30 p.m. Central Time, and you can find out more about that on my website, danieljwhiteside.com. Okay, guys, take care.